Hi, I'm Leigh Ann, the Director of Education at the Squam Lakes Association. I'm glad you are joining me to explore the wonders of the Squam Lake watershed. Today we'll take a closer look at one of the carnivorous plants that I mentioned in episode 3, the bladderwort. It was a goal of mine to find a flowering bladderwort, and last week I succeeded. New Hampshire is home to only 12 species of bladderworts, of which there are over 220 throughout the world. They earned their name because of the tiny bladders, or in fancy science talk, utricles, hence the genus name Utricularia. These utricles are very important to the bladderwort, as this is how they get some of the nutrients they need in order to survive. Because they are free-floating and lack roots and often live in open water, like Squam Lake, where there are low nutrient concentrations, they must draw their nutrients directly from the water. These bladders have tiny trigger hairs near their openings, and when zooplankton, mostly microscopic floating animals like water fleas or tiny insects like mosquito larvae, touch these hairs, it triggers the bladder to inflate, sucking in water, and the animal with it, and closing the door behind. In addition to getting nutrients by capturing prey, they, like other plants, also obtain nutrients through their leaves. Bladderwort leaves are finely divided, like many aquatic plants, and this helps them increase the surface area, allowing more space to absorb what little CO2 there is in the water. Carbon dioxide is a requirement for photosynthesis. Where does a floating plant go in the winter? They form overwintering vegetative buds called turions, which develop on branch tips in the early fall. Turions are dense balls of nearly formed leaves and tiny stems that sink to the bottom of the lake where they overwinter, and once the water warms back up, the winter buds separate from the decaying plant material and float to the surface where they begin growing. In addition to being able to reproduce to the next season through this process of creating turions, which creates genetically identical bladderworts, they can also reproduce via flowers, which increases their genetic diversity. The flowers look similar to a snapdragon and attract pollinators like bees and flies to its sweet nectar. After the bee leaves the flower then closes, trapping the pollen inside, resulting in the perfect moist protective environment to germinate and grow. If for some reason the bee delivered pollen from a different species of plant or no pollen at all, the flower will reopen after a few hours. I was lucky enough to find two different types of bladderworts, and based on their flowers, I am fairly confident in my identifications. The first I found was floating bladderwort, with its delicate yellow flower on a stalk that extends from a whorl of specialized leaves that form a float, as you can see here. Their bladders are also transparent with a pale green tint, found along the edges of their divided leaves. The other bladderwort that I found was large purple bladderwort, and the giveaway here is the lovely purple flower, and its leaves are arranged in whorls around the stem, and their tiny transparent bladders are attached to the tips of the divided leaves. Floating plants like bladderworts are important to the lake ecosystem because they form dense mats that provide a place for invertebrates to thrive, thus creating a place to hide, seek shade, and feast for fish, turtles, frogs, and salamanders. Keep an eye out for bladderwort flowers and turions, those winter buds, as you are out exploring the Squam Lakes watershed. Share your bladderwort photos, videos, and stories with us, and stay tuned for the next episode of Squam Watershed Wonders.